Tonight's featured readers are Abigail, Brandt, and Anson, Wright. Abigail was a co-founder of the Santa Barbara Poetry Festival. She led a writing group of award-winning poets in Carpinteria for 10 years. She's a 3-time Pushcart nominee. She won a statewide poetry contest in California and Oregon. In the words of Joanna Macy, her poems pulse with life. Her book, Bones of My Life, is available at this website or on the table back there, so even closer. Jazz musician, novelist, poet, and educator Anson Wright may not be a household name, but he should be. All About Jazz. That was a quote from All About Jazz. A graduate of Princeton, he wrote his novel Jericho at the age of 26. Openings, his second book was published with funding from the National Endowment of the Arts. His latest offering, Sandstone Monastery, is a full-length poetry book. Portions of his unpublished novel, 16 Dreams, have appeared in recent edition of Golden Handcuffs Review. So here are Anson and Abigail.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me, and to Abigail in particular for inviting me to read with her tonight. Can you hear me? Is this okay? Up a little bit? Oh, this? Yeah, I got it. Yeah, we got it. Thank you. These will go in my pocket. Not a good thing, but I think it'll work. So I do a number of different things. I do have books out, and I have them with me. I also have CDs. I do a lot of jazz. I'm a jazz guitarist, as well as being a poet. If you're interested in finding out more about me, I have a website, ansonwright.com. This is what we do in the digital age, right? We network. I'm also on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. You could friend me or look me up. I'm going to start today with a prayer. I have been fortunate in my life to work with the Hopi for a number of years and have good friends in the Southwest, Native American friends. And what I've discovered from going to various meetings there, especially with tribal folks, they always start with a prayer. It doesn't matter whether it's the BLM, it doesn't matter whether it's the BIA, it doesn't matter how official it is. Someone always stands up and prays. So this has become a little prayer poem of mine. A recent poem, a few years old. No harm. I bless roadkill. I bow to crosses marking the departed along the road. My steepled fingers brush my chin as I bless the hawk flying in solitude in the noon sky. The mud-caked cattle waiting for slaughter in their crowded feeding lots. The dead squirrel covered in blood on the highway berm. The newborn foal asleep near his mother in the green pasture. I bless the moon in all its phases. The sun rising in the eastern sky. The canyon wall basking in the desert sun. The snow-capped mountains cradling the rising moon. The coyote walking slowly across the meadow. The jackrabbit weaving in my truck's headlights. Every star in constellations I cannot name. Earth's four directions marked by countless ancient shrines. I bless the homeless man asking for money near the freeway entrance, the sadhu begging with lowered eyes at the temple gate, the black teenager straining against his handcuffs in an unmarked police car, the doctor praying for a miracle in a hospital chapel, the Honduran girl wiping away tears at a border clinic. The Dalai Lama saves a trapped fly, releasing it into the garden with his well wishes, smiling and unashamed. I carefully move the snail to the side of the road, hiding my actions from imagined neighbors bowing quickly and scurrying away. I remind myself I will suffer all lives, all fates. I remind myself all beings are holy, perfect offerings of the divine. Blessed are the tender-hearted. Blessed are those who befriend all creation. Blessed are those who do no harm. It's good for me to be bending over and standing up. It's good aerobics. And as I said, I've been graced with knowing Native Americans both in the Hopi world and in the Pueblo world of New Mexico. We have good friends. This is probably the oldest poem in the book Anson Monastery. And I'm reading this poem for the Hopi primarily because the equinox that just passed is a very important time. The solstice is a very important time to Native Americans. Most Native Americans are really aware. If you ask them, where is the sun rising? When is it rising? What phase is the moon in? They could tell you. It's part of their religion. So in this poem I mentioned Naim and Kachina. Kachinas are spiritual beings that bring fertility in life. They're still bringing fertility in life. But in Naim and Kachina, they're going back to the west. They've been here in the summer and they're going back to their home in the Western Mountains. July 16th, 1945 is when the first atomic bomb was exploded in New Mexico, Trinity site. For the Hopi. I believed it was the last day of Naim and Kachina. I dreamed it was the last day of Naim and Kachina. I dreamed it was July 16th, 1945, and the priests were in their kivas. The walls of the kivas were shaking. Feathered altars were surrounded by bright lights. Pottery danced in the air. I saw painted erasers cowering at the foot of the mesas, sacred tablets shattering beneath dried corn stalks, fetuses twisting in their wombs. I saw a spruce tree thrown to the ground, a sandstone figure with a missing right arm, white men with binoculars. I heard talk of destruction, talk of useless desert and Trinity site, talk of a missing brother, an Anglo-Saxon mystic, a first ritual of power. I heard talk of ceremonies with wine and brandy, of a small people with dark eyes, of a sacred land without water. I awoke on a bed of corn with rain on my cheeks. So shifting gears dramatically, I write poetry, I also write prose. And this next, two very different voices. Very different voices. So this is an excerpt from a book of mine called 16 Dreams that is still unpublished. I'm going to read a couple of prose things here. Hopefully I won't go too far over my allotted time. I'm trying to be good. In the jazz world, we're often not very good about allotted time. Actually, we're never good about allotted time. So as I said, a very different voice. From chapter 26. Let's get someone into that blinking red-ribbed beef-bone canoe and let them learn to vegetate a little. Dear reader, those were the first words I heard from the woman I did therapy with in Eugene. I hitchhiked down from Belknap Springs once a week to meet with our 6 other people in the small therapy group. Our therapist was a gray-haired woman in her 70s, and her office was a large, barren room over a second-hand bookstore. We sat on the hardwood floor for our 2-hour group. The only furnishing in the room was an old wooden canoe located beneath a large picture window. The ribs of the canoe had been painted blood red, and the Venetian blinds on the window had been painted flat black. Midnight black, she used to call it. The group I was in had been word of mouth advertised as a Gestalt group, but the Gestalt often included our therapist's own ways of emerging. Let's get someone into the blinking red-ribbed beef-bone canoe and let them learn to vegetate a little. She would simply call out her preference in the midst of whatever was being worked on. Occasionally someone would sit in the canoe for her. Nothing much ever happened. She paid little attention to you if you were in the canoe. She would smile at you when you returned to the circle. But I was never sure whether it was because you had been slightly cured by sitting in the canoe, or whether she was just happy that someone was willing to do what she wanted without questioning her about her wants. Benacerraf. Occasionally she did cry out, Benacerraf, when you were sitting in the canoe, then closed the Venetian blinds so the whole room went dark for about 10 seconds. She had the blinds wired to a button at her side that electronically closed and opened them. Her closing and opening the blinds was the only event that ever happened to anyone in the canoe, and it never happened with much regularity. Weeks would go by, dozens of people would sit in the canoe with nothing at all happening. Then one day she would call out, Benacerraf, close the blinds, open them seconds later to let the sunlight stream in. Her smile was no different on those days. You never felt more cured on those days. And another short excerpt fairly short, from the novel I have out, a novel called Jericho, came out many years ago. And somehow I still have original copies of it. Just saying. That's a whole other story. We won't go there. So again, a very different voice. Wilda speaking with Joshua. Wilda has just found out that she's pregnant. Unexpected. Joshua is ready to go with it. Wilda, not so much. I I told her that we could let the life grow, that it had happened and perhaps the happening itself would throw us onto a more certain course. Wilder became angry with me, spoke with an impatience I had not heard before. You were not in the room for the initial examination, she said. We're not there when the doctor told me that my tonsils reminded him of the sights off of 357 Smith & Wesson. I can still feel the barrel in my throat, the curve of the trigger guard rubbing against my clavicle when I run. Sometimes I dream of ramming my head against your knees, hoping the gun will be set off, sending the bullet scurrying up my throat into your thin lower legs. It is times like this, Joshua, that unleash my anger. I want to remind you of that anger. I am angry at the partialness of your awakening, angry that you have not let me speak enough, always telling me of your knowing me without my telling you the things you could not possibly know. You have chosen to hear the similar things in our thinking without regard for the many differences between us. There is no way to tell you what is happening inside my mind, Wilder said. No way except to cancel out what is happening in favor of a few select words which bow and curtsy at their every mention, so much that nothing very true ever gets said. I once had a word that used to use a ballerina's bar just to practice getting the last letters to bend their toes beautifully in the air. The word was yes. Yes screamed at the top of my lungs, like an arrow flying full speed through the air, until it split my forehead open and the nose spilled out. I may not have to use my arrow, Wilder added. The nose themselves have become bullets, and they may shoot themselves out at the slightest squeeze of my shoulders. So that's just a little excerpt from Jericho. Trying to keep everything from falling up here. Yeah. And here's a poem, anyhow, changing back to a little poetry. Poem I wrote a long time ago in New York City, where I spent 6 years of my life, where I went after I graduated from the school I went to in New Jersey, and where I actually started to learn something, really, and I mean that in the most serious way. Here's a poem that people like. It's only the second time I've ever read it. A poem called Skillet. They said to me, look, a skillet is not a senior thesis in philosophy. And I said, it's good for eggs. Teflon a little scratched, but as a fourth leg table leveler, it can't be beat. And they said, knowingly, perhaps a longer bibliography, just that. And when I offered them a toaster, they gave me a BA cum laude, which I ate for breakfast the next morning. Skillet. And going back again, because I'm supposed to the Southwest. The place I go in the Southwest is called Chaco Canyon, Chaco Culture National Historical Park. It's probably the most important archaeological site in the United States. It's a World Heritage Site, but it is sacred land to the Hopi, the Zuni, the Laguna, the Acoma, a lot of the Pueblos in New Mexico. It's part of their migration myth. And I've gone there, well, for 30 years in a row. I went there every year, sometimes 2 or 3 times. It's been a while since I've been there. Google it. Google Chaco Canyon, if you don't know about it. So this is another poem I don't read this one very often either. But I will. Everybody doing okay? Yeah, this one, and I'll get one more, or maybe two more, actually. A poem called Coming Home. Salt Lake City, heat rising off the asphalt below a third-floor balcony with a view southwest to Chaco. Across the shopping mall looms the Olive Garden, white people slow dining at a furious pace. Money flows from air-conditioned hands. Menu choices tempt in dizzying abundance. A leisure class dines casually with non-leisurely appetite. In Bloomfield, New Mexico, at the Conoco station in the heat of late morning, I'm struck by the bustle, the gas nozzles constant in and out, the sun-darkened workers busy about their day. I sense the earth's slow energy, many layers beneath their feet, the quiet presence of a shrine, unrealized in their lives. Perhaps wild ponies are always prancing in slow motion across the mesas. Perhaps speeding on the freeway, we are also just walking. The power grids in the distance leading to ancient signal fires. Perhaps we are still breathing cool spirit even in our frantic doing. And my sadness can give way to the faith that no worlds will be vanquished, that stillness resides even in this indulgence, this blistering flight from our own selves. And just to keep within a little bit, but within the time frame, got one more poem. Yeah, I'll do that one. It's the kind of poem that has to be read these days. And I've done it in the last few readings. I'm always closing. It's kind of a bookend to no harm at the beginning. Learn from the sadness. Learn from the sadness of a starless night. Learn from the tears of a mother near the grave of her son. Learn from the Lord Almighty in the thundering sky above Calvary. Learn from the Pharaoh asleep near his firstborn on a night shattered by screams. Learn from the swollen lips of Africa's dark-eyed children. Learn from the families huddled silent in Central America's countless graves. Learn from the shadows on Nagasaki's walls. Learn from the toothless women walking to Hitler's chambers. Learn that sacrifice in the name of freedom leads not to the promised land, but to darkness. Learn you shall not buy freedom with another's death. Moses, you did not want to serve, living among gentle shepherds, beholding a God without voice, without demands. Until the flames entranced you, their righteous tongues talking loudly of bondage, shouting for freedom. Long red tongues licking the barricaded front doors of Egypt's dying children, as God shielded his eyes from the price of liberation. Moses, was it you on the low cross, wood still smoldering from that lonely pasture? Did you hear him cry out for his father as the world grew still? Cry out for his father as the world grew dark. Cry out for his father until the pink ember heart gave up its glow. What is it we fear that death becomes our weapon? That children must die to hollow our myths. Who has taught us, and whom will we teach? Learn you shall not buy freedom with another's death. Thank you very much. Come on up.
Do I need a little adjusting? It's always a treat to see who comes out for poetry. Thank you, Mark. What has not changed? Because I am old. Because some days the years sit like mountains upon me. Dreams change, bodies change, even the ocean, old mother of my soul. Her body has changed too. What has not changed is that light which emanates from my spirit, and the stars whose ancient light still invites us to make a wish, and the constellations who watch down upon us, their perpetual tenderness, how their infinite compassion continues to guide us home. We were on a train going from Switzerland to Italy. This is about 8 years ago. And the, I don't know what you'd call them, gendarmes, the immigration police of Switzerland, they were on the train and they were kind of pulling people off. They had a German shepherd with them and they were seeking out illegal refugees. In this case, they were Syrians. Syrian lullaby. Church bells from the sleeping village chime the dreaming hours. Chill October nights sweeten the late harvest grapes that drowse in the dark, clustered on twisted vines. In these hills beyond borders, emigres lose themselves in web shadows. They have lost everything. Right now, they wish for invisibility, disappearing until dawn in dark clothing. They wish for a bed, a warm coat, home. Black hijabs cover the women's heads. A young woman comforts the baby at her breast. She remembers her Jada, her grandmother, singing, "Low hangs the morning star Aharon, Aharon, dull like a fading scar. One year we were up at Bright Bush Hot Springs, and it was called Project Quest, and my husband Werner and I were volunteers, and it was a camp set up just for people who had terminal illness. So this is an event that occurred there. Shadow woman rising. Behind me in shadow, she unfolds, arises, though she seems too fragile to lift herself out of the dark. She emits the deep scent of violet as she turns my way. Her eyes, limpid with pain, focus on mine. So close, I feel the flower of her breath, inhaling, exhaling, each breath sacred. She tells me she is tired of her journey, wonders, when will it end? Wonders and worries, who will she be then? I tell her I think we all end in spirit. You will be spirit, I say. She takes this in like a hard mint candy. I sit with her as she lets it melt on her tongue. So the Ars Poetica is a poetry form, and the form is for the poet to sort of state what is poetry to me. So here's mine. Because I was read to as a child, because I was enthralled by the rhythm of words, zoon, zoon, cuddle and croon over the crinkling sea, because I was an outsider, outcast, pariah, because I was too shy or too loud, awkward, gawky, apart, because I wore heavy eye makeup and stared at boys, because brigades of boys screamed my name at school, because of teenage sex, because I changed high schools, the maternity home, because I gave up my firstborn for adoption, even those words I gave up. Because my father had always wanted a boy, he brought me roses, red, bitter, and small. Because my daughter was born a year and a half later. Because my sister at Berkeley overdosed on tranquilizers, and my other sister, we had a bone to pick. Because my parents were infatuated with my dead sister's poetry, her big IQ, her Phi Beta Kappa key. My mother cut off her serpentine braids and chain-smoked herself to death. Because something was broken inside me, because of touch deprivation, disassociation, because I needed words. Because as a child I taught myself touch typing on my father's Underwood portable. Because I hid my poems in a box beneath my bed, always the coat of dust. L'chaim to the family photos, the randomness of it all. L'chaim to the bootleggers, the oddballs, the elite, not to mention the schmoozers and drive-by shooters, the judges and scholars and classroom teachers. L'chaim to the keepers of kosher kitchens. L'chaim to diaspora atheists and those old Zionists. And to Aunt Mildred, who ran off with the fry cook. Shalom to the luminous smile of my daughter. Shalom to my parents, their sad compromises, their $1 million view. Shalom, shalom to my long-lost sister and to my living sister who has traveled the 7 seas. Mazel tov to my beloved, he who is my tribe, because of poetry, because poetry kept me alive. I'm finally old enough to read that poem. Here's another glimpse of Europe, and this time we're riding a lift that goes up Mont Blanc, and I have kind of a tentativeness about edges and heights and vertigo and that whole thing, so I knew in advance I was going to do this, so I had to really set myself to do it, and here's my take. Thin air. Shadows spin earthward. Barreling words break into birds. The earth falls away. Sounds assemble into language, into voices, words unknown. Inhibited at altitude, heights rush my brain. What is this trembling, oh precipitous spirit? Starlight, quartz, ancient water. What do I know of earth? A name for everything, typeset letters, sepia ink, Roman alphabet whirling, a flock of crows. I, earthen, I, earthling, heart rising, eyes wide open, glacial glimmer, paper white snow, the whites of my eyes, the whiteness of my bones. So we're going to end with exhalation. Prayer is inhaling and exhaling the one breath, ruach of the universe. And that word, ruach, it's a Hebrew word. It's something with the sacred breath. And it's so interesting, when I looked up the word, the poem came just like that. There simply isn't a room large enough for this dance. It happens outside, among waving red fists of bursting peonies, monarch butterflies flashing bronze and black as we gaze into the wheel of sun, swarms of ladybugs beating the tall stems of blooming mustard, the creek gushing and slithering, its eddies stirring, alive with tadpoles afloat with green streamers of clotted frog eggs that hatch as we picnic and gather wildflowers and make love upon soft grass. This is how to say goodbye, how to say hello and I love you, and all the names of the beloved in one extended breath, as life hatches and thrusts all around us, celebrating itself in wild bursts every instant, as the leaping fish arcs in the heron's fast eye, and the moon rises molten and ambered above us, as all things spin and spiral in their urge toward birth, to feed, recreate, and die unencumbered. We journey, then dance beyond ourselves, reflected and golden in late harvest nectar, reflected forever, swimming these waters, flying these skies, reflecting this light within this body, this breath.
Thank you, Abby, and thank you, Anson. Wasn't that terrific? So, both Abby and Anson have books here, and you can talk to them about that. We also have some, I think it's lemon pound cake, and we have 2 lists over there. One is for the Salem Poetry Project mailing list, so if you want to hear about poetry that's happening around town or whatever, you can sign up on that list. And one's for the open mic, and so if you want to read at the open mic, you can sign up on that list. And so we're going to take a couple minutes. We're going to eat some cake, eat the cake. I don't want to have to take it home. And buy some books, and then we'll come back afterwards for the open mic. Okay.